Hello everyone, Freemantle here, with an installment of the liberal lexicon, this time where there's something right about what the liberal says, but where he jumps the rails before he gets to the destination. I'm going to look at how he talks about freedom and democracy. The liberal thinks freedom is good sometimes. That might sound surprising. The liberal or leftist political party, whatever it's called, and wherever in the world we find it, is the party that's calling for more and more and more and still more and yet more regulations, more laws. And laws are not suggestions or solicitations or pieces of friendly advice. They're orders. You do what the law tells you to or you're punished. But the liberal does have some use for freedom. He thinks it's good for enjoying yourself. Good when times are good. You wake up in the morning, you're still tired. Oh, I don't want to go to work today. Then it hits you. This is Sunday. You don't have to go to work. Free of the job today. Ah, bliss. You turn over and catch another 40 winks. But suppose you wake up and you don't have any job to go to. You're out of work. Been looking for a job for 8 months. Savings just about gone. Bills still coming in. Suppose there were no unemployment benefits. Freedom not so great then, is it? Says the liberal. He even thinks freedom for businesses is sometimes good. This is a sea change in liberal thinking that's occurred since the contemporary political left came into the world in the 1820s and 30s. The socialists and Marxists of the 19th century believed that every trace of so-called private ownership of the means of production should be expunged. Everything was to be owned and operated by society or the community or the so-called workers. Today, the liberal says, no, there is a place for private businesses and freedom for them, and that place is innovation. Liberals don't like business very much, but most people, liberals included, love the goodies it produces, the iPods and the iPads and the groaning supermarket shelves and all the rest of it. And many people think, quite rightly, that freedom for businesses has something to do with their having and enjoying those things. Businesses should be free to innovate, liberals think. But of course, regulations may guide the product development and so on, depending on what the regulations are. And once the product is on the market, it's going to fall under whatever the regulations there happen to be. So the liberal knows that everything considered, he'd look preposterous trying to make himself out as a champion of freedom. He wouldn't try it, even with his very low opinion of the average person. Nobody is so stupid he thinks the liberal's ideal is a free society. But Americans pay lip service to a free society. They still talk as though their freedom is important to them. So once in a while, the liberal will get together with his fellow liberals, in print or in person, and he'll say, look, the conservatives are getting away with saying they're the freedom fighters. We're losing points there. We should be saying that we are the standard bearers for freedom. Now, how is he going to do this? The freedom we're talking about here is political freedom. Freedom from restriction and control by the government. We're talking about the silence of the law. How can that square with if it moves regulated? It doesn't. If the liberal wants to portray himself as a champion of freedom, he has to change the meaning of the word. And that's exactly what he does. The freedom from control by the law that we're talking about is the traditional concept of freedom. For example, you can go in any church you want and the government has nothing to say about it. You are free from government control in choosing a church to attend. That's the traditional concept, the founding fathers' conception of freedom. Freedom from the government controlling what you do. The liberals' concept is that a person is free when he is able to do or have or be whatever. When the liberal government gives a person an education and makes him able to get a good job and earn a living, the liberal government has made that person free to an extent. The person is free to get the job and earn the money. That's the liberal conception, which he tries to make seem more profound than the old-fashioned freedom from concept, by saying that a man needs a good education or whatever if he's going to be truly free, authentically free, genuinely free. Free from, that's the traditional idea of freedom. Free to, that's the liberal idea, which is sometimes referred to as positive freedom. I call it the spoiled brat conception of freedom. Because if a spoiled child had a conception of freedom, it would be exactly the liberals' idea of it. The child thinks the universe is out of whack if there's some significant impediment standing between him and what he wants. He's not able to have what he wants, he's frustrated. And the big people around him better be bestirring themselves post-haste to remove that impediment and relieve his frustration so he can have what he wants. In just the same way, the person who isn't genuinely or truly or authentically free, as the liberal conceives it, is the person who isn't able to do or have or be what he wants because something is standing between that and him. Liberal programs and policies remove impediments, and so they make people truly free. That thinking is one reason the liberal sees no important difference between, for example, being fired and being fined, or between salesmanship and coercion. These are all pretty much the same thing to him because they all block a person from what he wants. A person is only free when nothing stands in his way, when all he has to do is reach out, literally or figuratively, and he has what he wants. Of course, a free society does not operate that way. There are lots of impediments to you in a free society. They're called other people. They're here, living their lives, and you have to accommodate them, just as they have to accommodate your life. The world doesn't get up and rearrange itself so you can have something just because you want or need it. Your freedom in a free society is, basically, freedom from the law so that, other things equal, you can act. It is legal freedom to act. It does not guarantee you getting what you want. So summing up, the liberal is right in finding value in freedom, but he goes off the track with his conception of positive freedom, spoiled brat freedom, that makes up most of what he thinks is valuable about it. There's also something right about the democracy that the liberal talks about. Often his voice will drop slightly, for democracy is serious and solemn business, and, I'll say it, almost sacred business, reverential business for the liberal. And democracy does have a place in the operations of good government, and so in a good society. But the liberal is wrong about where that place is. As I say in another video titled Democracy in the Doldrums, the word democracy has spilled out of politics and spread to almost any place we want to say all or everybody, as where we might talk about democratizing car ownership or mortgage loans or education. If a lot of people have it, it's been democratized. But in the core meaning, the political meaning, democracy means simply majority rule. The majority gets its way and the minority gets the majority's way too. Democracy is a way we all decide what we're all going to do. A lot of people think that's freedom. If we participate fully in a democratic political process, we're politically free. If enough of us do, our society is free. A democratic people is a free people, a lot of people think. No, it isn't. Democracy aims at only two things: finding out what the majority wants and carrying it out. Democratic dictatorship and democratic totalitarian society are not contradictions. They're not even ironic. That's because democracy is a process. Dictatorship and totalitarian society are outcomes, results. How could a democratic dictatorship come about? Simple. The voting majority of people decide that a dictatorship is their best bet. They turn over their lives to the dictator, figuring that if things don't work out so well, any other arrangement would have come out worse, and they stand by that decision as time goes along. They do what the dictator tells them to do, when he tells them to, and how he tells them to, and they figure that's maybe not wonderful all the time, but without the dictator, things could only be worse. Come to think of it, that sounds sort of like what we already... Well, let's press on. In a democracy, the majority gets its way and the minority has to go along. What's so wonderful about that, anyway? Doesn't it matter what the majority wants? If you think democracy is fabulous, consider the obvious case. So obvious, You'll know what it is by the time I finish the first 8 words describing it. Namely, suppose this is Germany in the 1930s. That's 8 words. And suppose we're going to have a referendum. It's a completely above-board democratic vote. Everybody gets to vote, even the Jews. The issue, should the Jews be exterminated? And you know what? It just happens that the voting majority thinks they should be. Well then, nothing wrong with the decision, since it was an above-board democratic decision, wasn't it? The liberal often talks as though he thinks democracy is the basis of a good society. I say democracy is a very bad basis for society. A good society would have a democratic government, that is, one that represents the citizens in certain issues. But I say democracy has to be based on individual rights. A person's right to live his life as he chooses, not as the majority chooses. You start with the rights, then you have democracy. Democracy is absolutely secondary in a good society. The liberal is right in finding value in democracy, but he goes off the track in overrating it. In politics, democracy should always be controlled by and subservient to individual rights. That's one takeaway from today's video. The other, in a free society, freedom is the silence of the law. That's all it is. It is not the same thing as ability, as the liberal tries to make out. Thank you for listening.